The first time he saw her, the city was behaving like it had forgotten how to be a city. Streetlights blinked out in uneven pulses, as if someone far above was tapping a finger against the sky and losing patience with the rhythm. The sea wind carried static that didn't belong to weather, and every reflective surface, windows, bus stops, even the polished side of a parked food truck, seemed to hesitate a fraction too long before returning his own face. He was walking home because the metro had temporarily ceased synchronizing with local reality. According to a cheerful announcement that repeated every 30 seconds like it was proud of the achievement. That was when he heard the sound behind the service tunnel gate. Not a crash, not a scream, but the soft metallic complaint of something heavy deciding whether it wanted to exist here or somewhere else. He should have kept walking. He even started to. Then curiosity, that ancient malfunction in human survival programming, grabbed him by the collar and dragged him back. The gate was half collapsed, bent inward as if something had politely asked it to move and it had obeyed out of fear. Inside, the tunnel lights flickered in a pattern that looked almost like language. And there she was. She stood perfectly still, like motion itself had not yet been granted permission. Long ears, too long, too deliberate, tilted slightly as she listened to the city, the way a person might listen to a distant argument through a wall. Her face was human in every way that mattered, until you tried to define what human meant and suddenly realized the word was less stable than expected. Her eyes reflected light in layers, like stacked horizons. She looked at him as if he were the unexpected variable in a calculation she had already solved incorrectly. He opened his mouth. Nothing useful came out. His brain offered several options: scream, run, faint, or ask if she needed directions. He chose a fifth option that wasn't listed anywhere in biology textbooks. Hi. She tilted her head. The movement was precise, almost mechanical, but not machine-like, more like someone who had learned motion from observing it rather than feeling it. "You are local," she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded, then immediately regretted it, because it made him feel like a representative of humanity. And he had never been trusted with that level of responsibility, even in group projects. Behind her, the tunnel wall shimmered faintly, like reality had suffered a minor disagreement with itself and was trying to smooth it over. He noticed then that she was not injured, not lost in the conventional sense. She was paused, like a message waiting in a buffer. A siren in the distance started up, then stopped halfway through its own sound, as if embarrassed. "You shouldn't be here," he said, which felt deeply unfair considering she had not chosen his city as her dramatic entrance stage. "I agree," she replied calmly. "However, relocation protocols failed." He blinked. "Relocation protocols?" She looked at him as if he had asked why water is wet. "Yes." A long silence followed. Somewhere nearby, a vending machine loudly refunded itself for no apparent reason. He rubbed his face. "Okay. Just hypothetically, if someone was relocated incorrectly, do they usually stand in broken tunnels staring at strangers?" "That depends on the quality of the relocation system," she said. That was when he noticed the faint glow under her skin, not visible like light, but like something remembering it used to be energy. And for reasons he would later blame on sleep deprivation and poor life choices, he took off his coat and held it out. She stared at it. "Is this a containment device?" "It's a jacket," he said, "for cold or existential crises. Sometimes both." After a pause, she accepted it. That was the moment everything became irreversible. Because once she stepped out of the tunnel with him, blending into the city's broken rhythm like she had always been part of its malfunctioning system, he realized the simplest truth of all. Whatever she was now walking beside him. And whatever was looking for her would not politely knock. He told himself it was temporary. That was the first lie. The second lie was that hiding someone with long ears and a mild tendency to question the structural integrity of reality would be easy in a city this big. The city, unfortunately, heard that thought and immediately began taking it personally. At first, it was almost funny. Almost. Lyra learned how to sit at his tiny kitchen table within 6 minutes, but it took her 3 hours to understand why he kept something called instant noodles in a cupboard labeled emergency diplomacy. When she finally tried them, she declared them suspiciously efficient food architecture, which he took as a compliment even though it sounded like a threat assessment. She adapted to human life with the unsettling speed of someone who had already studied it from a distance for too long. She learned how to mimic laughter, though hers always arrived half a second late, like it had to pass through customs first. She learned sarcasm too, but weaponized it immediately. Your society relies heavily on pretending you understand each other, she observed one evening while watching him fail to assemble a second-hand holographic kettle. It is impressive, inefficient but impressive. I prefer socially complex, he said, twisting the kettle until it emitted a small beam of light that briefly projected a warning sign he couldn't read. That is also a form of pretending, she replied. Outside, the city continued its slow descent into technical confusion. Street ads occasionally displayed messages in languages that didn't exist until they appeared. Traffic lights sometimes reversed emotional tone, green feeling like hesitation, red like encouragement. Once, an elevator in his building opened onto what looked suspiciously like a desert landscape before snapping back and politely apologizing in 3 different dialects of static. He stopped asking questions after that. The radio in his apartment became worse. It began whispering patterns that resembled math trying to become music, but giving up halfway through. Lyra listened to it without touching the device, her expression tightening like someone recognizing their childhood home in a dream that had been slightly redesigned. They are searching, she said. He tried to play it cool. Who? Because if it's my landlord again, I'm not responsible for interstellar escalation. She didn't smile. That was usually how he knew things were serious. They do not perceive me as missing, she added. They perceive me as misplaced. That sounds less flattering. It is administrative language, she said. It is never flattering. That night, she stood by the window longer than usual. The city reflected in her eyes looked wrong, like it had been translated too many times. He noticed her ears twitch slightly whenever certain frequencies passed through the air, like distant conversations brushing against her thoughts. You could leave, he said before he fully decided to say it. She didn't turn around. No. That was fast. I am not here by choice, she said, then paused. But I am here. He almost joked about how that was the least comforting motivational statement he had ever heard. But something in her voice stopped him. Instead, he said, okay, then we figure it out. She finally looked at him. You say that as if you are qualified. I fixed my toaster once, he said. It started singing. I consider that relevant experience. For the first time, she made a sound that might have been laughter if laughter had been engineered in a laboratory and released carefully into the wild. Then the lights went out. Not the usual blackout. Not the city's ongoing identity crisis with electricity. This was different. The absence arrived like a decision had been made somewhere far above them and immediately enforced everywhere at once. In the dark, his phone lit up without being touched. Not with an incoming call, not with a message, with a map. And on that map, their building was marked in a symbol that hurt to look at, as if his eyes were being asked to read something they were never designed to understand. Lyra exhaled slowly. They found the echo, she said. He swallowed. The what? She turned toward him fully now. And for the first time, she looked less like someone hiding and more like someone who had been waiting for consequences to arrive. The darkness did not stay empty for long. It never did in this city anymore. The map on his phone pulsed like a heartbeat that didn't belong to any human organ. The symbol over his building expanded, contracted, then stabilized as if deciding what version of reality would be most inconvenient for everyone involved. Somewhere below them, pipes hummed in a frequency that made the teeth ache, and the walls felt suddenly less like walls and more like polite suggestions. He looked at Lyra. She looked different now. Not physically, not in any dramatic transformation sense. Her long ears were slightly lowered, like antennae catching signals too large for the room. The faint glow beneath her skin had intensified, no longer subtle, now visible in soft layers like overlapping auroras trying to hide inside a person. So, he said, because his brain had decided humor was still an acceptable survival strategy. On a scale from mild inconvenience to planetary paperwork, where are we? Planetary paperwork, she replied immediately. Great. Love that for us. A sound rolled through the building, not an explosion, not a siren, but something in between, like reality clearing its throat. The air shimmered near the ceiling, and a structure unfolded out of nothing the way an idea becomes visible right before it ruins someone's afternoon. It wasn't a ship in the human sense. It was more like geometry, deciding it was tired of being abstract. Thin layers of light folded into one another, forming a presence that felt less physical and more administrative. Lyra stepped slightly forward, and he instinctively followed, because apparently his life had become the kind where following glowing alien women into impossible situations was now routine. "I was not lost," she said quietly. "I was quarantined." "That is a very strong word," he muttered. "It is an accurate one." The structure responded to her voice. Not linguistically, but structurally, like it had been waiting for that exact frequency of existence. Lines of light stabilized into a doorway. Then the voice arrived. It was not loud. It was not even particularly dramatic. It sounded like someone reading regulations aloud in a very large, very empty room. Echo designate confirmed. Containment lifted. Field anomaly classified as resolved deviation. He raised his hand slightly. "Quick question, are we the deviation, or is it the city, or is it me personally? Because I feel like I should know what I'm being blamed for." Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the structure like someone recognizing a home they had once argued with. "I was sent to observe your world without interference," she said. "I interfered." "That's it," he said. "You didn't even, accidentally start a war or anything. That feels underwhelming for interstellar consequences." She glanced at him. "You were the interference." He blinked. "Excuse me." The structure flickered, and for a moment he saw it, not as a ship, but as layers of archived decisions. Millions of possibilities where she never met him. Millions where she passed through unnoticed. Millions where humanity remained ignorant and comfortable, and exactly one where she stopped. The voice returned, slightly altered. "Cross-contact event detected. Non-authorized emotional anchoring identified." He frowned. "That sounds like I'm a software bug." Lyra's expression softened in a way he hadn't seen before. "You are a variable they did not account for." "Well," he said, trying very hard not to panic, "they should really upgrade their accounting system. It's very rude." The doorway widened. He expected fear then. He expected the classic human reaction. Running, screaming, possibly negotiating with inanimate objects. Instead, he just felt tired in a way that was strangely calm, like something inside him had already accepted the shape of the answer. "You can go back," he said to her. Lyra hesitated. That hesitation lasted longer than any of her calculations ever had. "Yes," she said, a pause. "And you can stay," she added. He let out a short laugh. "That's not how kidnappings usually work, just so you know." "This is not kidnapping," she replied. "This is permission." The structure waited, very politely, very annoyingly. He looked at his apartment behind him, the broken kettle, the flickering lights, the city that couldn't decide whether it was collapsing or evolving. Then he looked at her. "You know," he said, "I spent most of my life trying to avoid anything that looked like destiny." "That is statistically common," she said. "And yet here I am," he continued, "standing in front of what I'm pretty sure is interdimensional HR, debating paperwork with an alien who thinks instant noodles are suspicious technology." For the first time, Lyra smiled without delay, a real one. "I will note that your species is resilient," she said. "Resilient or just bad at saying no," he replied. The structure began to close the anomaly field. The city outside slowly returned to its imperfect normal lights, stabilizing, signals untangling, reality sighing in relief like it had survived a very long meeting. He made his decision then, quietly, without ceremony. He stepped back. "Hey," he said. Lyra looked at him. "If your people ever do audits again," he added, "maybe skip the dramatic glowing geometry. It's a lot, very intimidating. Try email next time." She laughed again, this time fully. Then she touched the air beside him, and for a moment the world aligned, not perfectly, but enough. The structure accepted its result. Containment lifted. Observation complete. Anomaly retained as a proved variable. And when the light finally settled back into the city, nothing looked entirely different. Except him. Because he had learned, somewhere between broken tunnels and impossible maps, that some secrets aren't about hiding things from the world. They are about deciding what kind of world you are willing to stand inside when the secret is finally gone. The morning after the light returned felt suspiciously ordinary. That was the first problem. The second problem was that ordinary had never agreed with this city before, so it wore it like a borrowed coat, awkward, slightly shimmering at the edges, as if reality wasn't fully convinced it deserved stability yet. He woke up to the sound of his kettle making a small, apologetic beep. It had stopped singing entirely, which he considered either a victory or a sign of emotional withdrawal. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt newly invented. Even the air seemed to have stopped arguing with itself. Lyra was by the window again. Of course she was. She always stood there now, like she was memorizing the idea of staying. "You're still here," he said, sitting up slowly. "That is generally the definition of still," she replied. "Fair." Outside, the city functioned. Properly, almost offensively so. Traffic flowed without philosophical hesitation. Streetlights behaved like they had attended a very strict etiquette school. Even the vending machines seemed less emotionally unstable. And yet, occasionally, something flickered, just for a fraction of a second. A reflection that didn't match its source. A shadow stepping half a beat out of sync, the memory of something impossible refusing to fully delete itself. "They stabilized the region," Lyra said, "so no more intergalactic audit nightmares." She tilted her head. "There will always be audits." "That's not comforting." "It is accurate." He swung his legs off the bed. "So what happens now? Do I get a certificate, a medal, a strongly worded interdimensional apology letter?" A pause. Then, from nowhere he could identify, a thin rectangle of light appeared above the table. It hovered politely, like it was waiting for him to acknowledge its existence before proceeding. Lyra sighed. "They sent documentation." "Of course they did," he muttered. "Even aliens love forms." He reached for it cautiously. The moment his fingers passed through, it unfolded into language that didn't fully translate, but somehow still made sense in the way dreams sometimes do. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't reward. It was classification. "Approved persistent anomaly adjacency unit," he read slowly. "That sounds like I've been promoted to side character in my own life." "It is less dramatic in our language," Lyra said. "Yeah, well, your language needs marketing help." For the first time, she laughed without checking whether it was appropriate. Silence followed, but it wasn't the heavy kind anymore. He looked at her properly then, not like something to hide, not like something to protect from the world, just her. Long ears catching the morning light like they belonged there more than anything else in the room ever had. "So," he said softer, "you're leaving again, aren't you?" Lyra didn't answer immediately. That had become her way of being honest. "I am no longer required to remain," she said at last. "That's not what I asked." Another pause, then, "No." The word landed strangely. Not heavy, not light, just real. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for several days, possibly weeks, possibly since the first blackout. "Good," he said, "because I've been practicing explaining you to my toaster, and it keeps asking if you're a government experiment." "I am not," she said. "See, that's exactly what a government experiment would say." She looked at him, and this time the expression she wore wasn't confusion or analysis. It was something simpler, something dangerously close to fondness. Outside, somewhere in the city, a billboard flickered briefly into an unknown star map before correcting itself and apologizing in 3 languages. He noticed it. She noticed it too. Neither of them reacted. That was the change, not the aliens, not the glowing geometry, not the administrative horrors of interstellar bureaucracy. It was the fact that the impossible no longer demanded panic. He stood up and stretched. "So what now?" Lyra stepped away from the window. "Now, we continue observation." "Of Earth." "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Cool, cool, cool, cool. Do I get to be observed with snacks at least?" "That is already documented as required." "Good, I like being a standardized requirement." She moved closer, and for a second the air between them felt like it remembered the tunnel again, the moment everything began without permission. "You could have returned me," she said quietly. "Yeah," he replied. "But then I'd have to explain to myself why I did that, and I'm terrible at paperwork." That earned a small smile again. The city outside finally settled into itself, fully, properly, like it had decided to stop improvising existence for a while. But somewhere in its foundations, something remained. A faint echo of her arrival, of his choice, of the moment 2 very different kinds of loneliness accidentally became shared. Lyra adjusted her stance, as if preparing to step into a long-term equation. I will remain, she said. He nodded. Good, I was running out of weird things to do alone. A pause. Then she added, almost casually, your species still relies on pretending you understand each other. He grinned, and your species still relies on dramatic entrances through broken tunnels. That is efficient. It is not. It is memorable. He considered that. Okay, he said, fair. And for the first time since the city forgot how to be a city, everything felt exactly as it should,